Hello there, thrill seekers, and how you doing? Okay, so yesterday I talked to you about Nishijima Roshi, my teacher's ideas about love and hate and the balance of love and hate, and I hope all of you were thoroughly confused by that. I'd like to confuse you some more by talking about a different aspect of love. So before I go into this, I want to kind of talk about words. And one of the problems with discussing things that like this, like what I try to keep discussing on this YouTube channel, is that we're talking about things that go beyond words. And really, pretty much everything goes beyond words. But my favorite story about the danger of attaching to words, I don't know, danger is probably too strong of a word, but anyway, the problems of attaching to a word is I was listening to Nishijima Roshi give a lecture at Tokein Temple in Japan where we had our retreats, and it was sometime not that long after the events of September 11th, 2001. It was sometime not long after the day, September 11th, 2001. And Nishijima Roshi was giving a talk, and he made a reference to it, and he referred to it as the accident on September 11th. Now, Nishijima Roshi was a good speaker of English, but he was not a native speaker of English. So I think most of us who had sat around there, me for instance, had listened to him a long time, understood that he probably meant incident rather than accident. But what happened after the lectures, there was one guy who was really, really agitated, who was a newcomer to the group, who was just so upset because Nishijima Roshi had talked about that event as being an accident. And it wasn't an accident, and he was really upset, rather than kind of going, no, he probably just meant incident. So that's a problem. Sometimes words, as the Led Zeppelin song goes, have two meanings. Sometimes words have multiple meanings. Words almost always have multiple meanings, and especially when you're dealing with a word like love. So, as some of you have probably noticed, I've been doing a lot of reading in the Advaita Vedanta tradition lately. It's just been something I've been keen on, interested in. Particularly two guys, Ramana Maharshi, Sri Ramana Maharshi, and Nisargadatta Maharaj, my two favorites from that tradition. And they both use the word love in a slightly different way, and I'd like to present that to you. Now, I've been living with Nishijima Roshi's ideas of balancing love and hate for 30 years or something like that. So I'm pretty comfortable talking about them and what I think they mean. This stuff I have only been introduced to fairly recently, so I feel like I'm on a little bit shakier ground trying to interpret it, but I'm just going to do my best anyway because I think it's interesting stuff. And they're using the word love in a very different way from what Nishijima Roshi is talking about. So they're using the word love to talk about something which is probably somewhat related to what Nishijima Roshi is talking about when he uses the word love, but isn't the same thing. So let's get into it. This, I believe, comes from this book, Talks with Ramana Maharshi, but I got it off a PDF, so I'm not absolutely sure. Let me just read you this dialogue. Most of this stuff is in the form of dialogues. So Ramana Maharshi says, "To infer one's existence, no other evidence is necessary. The senses and the mind arising from the ego cannot serve as evidence relating to the self with a capital S, which I take to be roughly equivalent to Jiko in Dogen's writings. So he uses the word Jiko, which literally means self, in a similar way. The big self, the self that is the whole universe. It says the self is their basis, that is the ego and the senses, the basis of the ego and the senses. They do not exist independently of self. So ego and senses do not exist independently of the self. One's own existence is self-evident. Bliss is the self. All become dear only owing to the love of self." And the person he's talking to says, "Love postulates duality. How can the self be the object of love?" I believe this person is a Westerner, a Christian, who's talking to him. And Ramana Maharshi answers, "Love is not different from the self. Love of an object is of an inferior order and cannot endure, whereas the self is love. In other words, God is love." And the person answers, "It is also the Christian idea." And that's as far as the dialogue goes there. Here's another one. He's talking to somebody who's mourning the death of I think, a wife or loved one. Mourning is not the index of true love. It betrays love of the object of its shape only. That is not love. True love is shown by the certainty that the object of love is in the self, self again with the capital S, and that it can never become non-existent. That's another one. Here's another one. On the death of King George V, two devotees were discussing the matter in the hall. They were very upset. The master said to them, the master being Ramana Maharshi, said, "Whoever dies or is lost, what is that to you? Die yourself and lose yourself, becoming one with love." So those are some quotes from Ramana Maharshi about love. Now, so love is the same as the self. Now, Nisargadatta Maharaj goes a little further with this, so I'd like to read you some of what he says. Here's a questioner. Are awareness and love one and the same? Then Nisargadatta Maharaj says, of course. Awareness is dynamic. Love is being. Awareness is love in action. By itself, the mind can actualize any number of possibilities, but unless they are prompted by love, they are useless. Love precedes creation. Without it, there is only chaos. So that's interesting. Love precedes creation. Okay, the last one I want to bring up before I try to discuss this is quite a long quote, and it comes from a book called Self-Love, the Original Dream, which I only have on ebook format, but I better order the paper book because I always have a hard time with ebooks. Anyway, this is a long quote, and it appears in the introduction. It probably appears elsewhere in the book as well, but it appears in the introduction for the book, and this is Nisargadatta Maharaj again talking about love. He says, "Love is not a name. Love is not a word." Well, it is, but okay. "Love is our consciousness, which you like most. Our consciousness itself is love. You like it very much, and in order to keep its company, you are taking so much trouble. All the activities in this world are meant to have company of self-love." That's what's written, and so we'll live with that. All the activities in this world are meant to have company of self-love. We know that we cannot have its company indefinitely. Still, we do so much to continue it. That is the love. Your self-love is called Brahman. Brahman is an interesting concept, which probably would take a while to get into. I used to think that Brahman was another word for God, and it is, but it is also the self, the self as God. That sounds like about the best explanation I can give right there. Let's see. It also exists as the world. So love, self-love, also exists as the world. The world you see around you is self-love. This is what he's saying. All the names are given to that self-love. So any name you give to anything is a name you're giving to love of self. The appearance of that self-love for certain duration has created eminence, fame, and history. Now that, I'm not sure what to make of that sentence, but let's keep going. The self-love itself is the godliness of God, the essence of Brahman, just Brahman. I think that idea of self-love has created eminence, fame, and history is that the entire universe is created out of this, what he is referring to as self-love. And he says self-love is godliness of God, the essence of Brahman, just Brahman. In this world, what do you like most other than your self-love? You like all other things because first you like to be. So your love to be is what makes it all happen. Your self-love is a great desire. It is a great craving, a great hope. That itself is self-love. If you are not, for whom are the hopes, desires, and cravings? This desire to be, hope to be, or self-love must be known fully. By taking your body as yourself, you have hopes, desires, and cravings for the things of the world. Instead, hope for your own self, desire yourself. Your consciousness has appeared spontaneously, and there is a craving to be. I must continue to exist. You are yourself a storehouse of joy. You are an ocean of happiness. But for that, you have to reach it. All your hopes, desires, and cravings based on your body identity take you on a descending path. But your urge for the self will take you up to fullness. So that's a really weird thing to say, but he's defining love in a totally different way from anybody else I've heard talking about love. But the love to be is what creates you and creates the universe. And your love of anything else is your love of self, because all of it is self. So self loves self without an object. There is no object but the self, and the self is its own object. I am my own beginning, my own ending. That's a line from Star Trek, from the episode The City on the Edge of Forever, written by the great Harlan Ellison. Anyway, that is what maybe Harlan Ellison read Ramana Maharshi and Nisargadatta Maharaj. I don't know. Could be. But it's real interesting stuff, and I am not sure I can interpret it for you and say, here's what I think it means. I think it's better to just kind of leave it as it is and listen to it and maybe try to see if I can imbibe it a little more to the point where I can understand exactly what they're referring to. But I like this because it meshes with the understanding I've been able to get through Zen practice. And so when I hear it spoken or read it spoken, it has a kind of a, I hate words like resonance, but it has a kind of resonance to me that it makes sense. But it's a very difficult understanding of love because it's so different from ideas of romantic love or Valentine's Day love or all you need is love or whatever else kind of love you can have. He's redefining love as being the basis of existence itself. God is love, but when we say God is love, I ordinarily think that to think of that as meaning, God is this loving dude, he loves everybody. But maybe God and love are actually the same thing, rather than saying God is somebody who has a lot of love. Maybe love is God. Love is the meaning of life. Life is the meaning of love, as the Ruddles said. There you go. I thought that was some interesting stuff, and I hope you did too. If you want to send me money to get more interesting stuff to read and then talk to you about it, you can go to the URL you're seeing on the screen below, which is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen.info/donate. There you will find links to my PayPal and Patreon accounts. Those are my number one and usually only ways of making a living, so I really appreciate your support. But as always, this is offered for free, so you don't gotta pay if you don't want to pay. We will see you next time. Have a good time all the time. Bye. Hey Ziggy, what do you love? Do you love sniffing things? Do you love walks? Do you love treats? Yeah, I think you love treats the best. Alright, we'll see you later.